There are confessions that make people uncomfortable. And then there are truths that make people look away. What I'm about to tell you belongs to the second kind. For 10 years of my life, the person who hurt me the most was not a stranger. Not a criminal hiding in the dark. Not a man I met by chance. It was the child I carried inside my body. My name is Eleanor Bennett. I am 72 years old, and for most of my life, people here in Savannah knew me as the gentlewoman who sold herbs at the weekend market. The one with kind eyes. The one who always listened. The one who smelled like dried lavender and chamomile. No one ever guessed what lived behind my smile. Before I tell you what happened to me, I need you to understand who I was before everything broke. I was 19 when I became pregnant. His father disappeared the moment responsibility showed its face. I worked in a textile factory where the air was thick with dust and noise, and the days felt endless. I stitched clothes I could never afford, bent over a machine until my back screamed, just so my son would never feel unwanted. I named him Julian. From the beginning, I loved him too fiercely. I told myself that love would fix everything my own childhood had lacked. I hugged him often. I praised him constantly. I protected him from every hardship I could. And for years, it seemed to work. Julian was polite, quiet, helpful. Teachers praised him. Neighbors admired him. People would say, "You raised a good boy, Eleanor." I believed them. What no one tells you is that excessive devotion can quietly rot into entitlement. By the time Julian turned 18, something shifted. At first, it was subtle. A look that lingered too long. A presence behind me in doorways. The feeling of being watched. When I changed clothes, I told myself I was imagining it. I worked too much. I was tired. Mothers shouldn't suspect their sons of terrible things. But then the touching started. Too many hugs. Kisses that didn't end. Hands resting where they didn't belong. Followed by laughter and excuses. "You're my mom. I can't even show affection now." Every time I protested, he flipped the blame onto me. "You're paranoid. You think too dirty. You're tired. You should rest more." He didn't just cross boundaries, he rewrote reality until I doubted my own mind. I started locking doors. Dressing differently. Timing my showers. And still, I felt hunted. In my own home. Then came the night he climbed into my bed. He said he had a nightmare. Said he was scared. Said he needed comfort. I froze. Somewhere deep inside, a voice screamed that this was wrong. But the mother in me, the foolish, conditioned part, won. That night, I felt a body press against mine. A hand where it should never be. When I confronted him the next morning, he smiled and said, "You dreamed it." Gaslighting doesn't start with cruelty, it starts with calm confidence. Weeks later, my body betrayed me. On an ordinary workday, while sewing a batch of dresses, pain exploded inside my skull. The world spun. The machines faded. I collapsed onto the concrete floor. I woke up in a hospital bed, unable to move the left side of my body. A stroke. The doctor said stress had destroyed me slowly. Years of overwork. Years of silence. Julian stood by my bed holding my hand, tears in his eyes. "I'll take care of you, Mom," he promised. I won't let anything happen to you. I didn't realize the stroke hadn't saved me, it had trapped me. When I came home, I couldn't bathe myself, dress myself, walk. I depended on him for everything. At first, his care seemed gentle, almost heroic. Then he chased away the visiting aide. Then the baths grew longer. Then his hands stopped pretending. I was paralyzed. And the monster I raised finally had permission. I believed the worst thing that could happen to a mother was being abandoned by her child. I was wrong. When people hear the word caregiver, they imagine sacrifice, patience, love. They don't imagine control. After the stroke, my world shrank to a single bedroom. I could no longer stand without help. My left arm hung useless beside me, like it belonged to someone else. My speech came slower, softer, slurred when I was tired. Julian became everything: my legs, my hands, my voice. At first, I was grateful. He fed me, helped me bathe, lifted me gently from the bed. He told everyone he had put his life on hold for me. Neighbors praised him. The church ladies brought casseroles and told him God would reward such devotion. Praise is dangerous when it feeds the wrong soul. A social worker arranged for a visiting aide named Margaret. She was kind, experienced. She knew how to care for stroke patients with dignity. For the first time since coming home, I felt safe. Julian hated her immediately. He criticized the way she moved me, said she was rough, claimed she didn't clean me properly. He watched her every second, correcting her, hovering like a shadow. Within a week, she quit. After that, he said calmly, "No one will take care of you like I do." Isolation never announces itself, it arrives disguised as concern. The baths changed. What used to take 15 minutes stretched into nearly an hour. Julian insisted. Paralysis caused hidden dirt. Said infections could kill me if I wasn't cleaned thoroughly. He spoke with authority, quoting things he claimed to have read online. His hands lingered, then pressed, then explored. When I protested, he sounded offended. "I'm saving your life. Do you want to die from infection? You don't understand medicine." I wanted to scream, but fear sat heavy in my chest. I depended on him to lift me, to feed me, to get me to the toilet. Dependence silences faster than threats. Soon, he controlled everything. My medication schedule, my meals, my visitors. When neighbors came by, he sent them away. "She's sleeping. The doctor said no visitors. She gets confused." People believed him. And slowly, they stopped coming. At night, he invented examinations. Said bed sores could appear anywhere. That circulation problems required massage. That stress could cause another stroke. Each explanation sounded medical, logical, convincing. I started questioning myself. Was I misunderstanding? Was this normal care I simply didn't recognize anymore? Abuse works best when it sounds reasonable. Then came the words that truly broke me. One afternoon, when I tried to push his hand away with what little strength I had left, his voice changed. Calm. Cold. "Who do you think they'll believe? A sick woman who can barely speak, or a son who gave up everything?" My blood ran cold. He told me if I spoke out, people would think the stroke had damaged my mind. That he would put me in a nursing home where strangers would hurt me worse. You'd rot there, he said softly. No one would care. Fear doesn't need violence, it only needs credibility. From that day on, I stopped resisting. The routine became unbearable. Morning, forced baths. Afternoon, invented physical therapy. Night, relaxation he claimed prevented strokes. He mixed cruelty with affection. I do this because I love you. You're the most important woman in my life. The words made me sicker than the acts. Sometimes he gave me pills that weren't prescribed. Said they were vitamins. After taking them, my body felt heavy. My thoughts slowed. My tongue refused to cooperate. I suspect now they were meant to quiet me. He wasn't just abusing me, he was chemically erasing my resistance. Days blurred into months. Months into years. I prayed for death. But fate had not finished with me. One afternoon, while he was hurting me, something unexpected happened. I screamed. Not a polite sound. Not a weak cry. A scream pulled from somewhere ancient and desperate inside me. And for the first time in years, someone heard it. I thought my scream would only earn me punishment. I was wrong. The scream didn't come from my throat. It came from somewhere deeper, a place that had been silent for years. I didn't plan it. I didn't think. My body simply refused to endure another second. The sound tore out of me raw and broken, loud enough that it shocked even Julian. He froze. For a moment, I thought he might strike me. Instead, he pressed a hand over my mouth and whispered sharply, "Stop it. You're hurting yourself." But it was too late. Because the walls heard. Next door lived Mrs. Calder, an older widow who spent most of her days at work. That afternoon, she was homesick. Later, she told the police she had never heard a scream like that before, not pain, not fear, but pure terror. She knocked on the door. Julian answered calmly, smiling the way everyone trusted. "She's having a bad episode," he said. "The stroke does that sometimes." Mrs. Calder tried to peer past him. "I'd like to see her," she said. He had never been challenged before. He blocked the doorway. Told her I was resting. That visits upset me. That the doctor said silence was best. She didn't move. "I'll only take a minute," she replied. Something in her voice unnerved him. He hesitated, and that was all she needed. She pushed past him and walked into my bedroom. She saw my face. Red. Wet. My eyes wide with something that couldn't be faked. I tried to speak, but the words tangled. All I could do was shake my head violently and let out a broken sound that barely resembled language. Mrs. Calder stepped back. "Oh my God," she whispered. He realized control slips fastest in front of witnesses. She said she was calling an ambulance. Julian protested. Said it wasn't necessary. Said I would calm down. She dialed anyway. At the hospital, everything felt unreal. Bright lights. Clean sheets. Nurses moving with purpose. Julian stayed glued to my side, answering every question before I could. "She's fine. She's confused. She doesn't always understand what's happening." Then something unexpected happened. The doctor asked him to leave the room. Julian smiled politely and refused. The doctor's tone hardened. I wasn't asking. For the first time in years, I was alone with someone who could help me. Silence only survives where there's no privacy. The doctor examined me carefully. Too carefully. His expression changed when he saw bruising that didn't match medical care. Marks where there should have been none. He asked me yes or no questions. Could I nod? He asked me yes or no questions. Could I nod? When he asked if someone was hurting me, I nodded. When he asked if it was my son, I nodded again. Tears streamed down my face, as if they had been waiting for permission. The room filled quickly, a social worker, a nurse, a woman who introduced herself as a trauma counselor. They listened. They believed me. When Julian was confronted, he laughed. Said I was delusional. Said strokes cause hallucinations. Said he had sacrificed everything for me. Abusers rely on disbelief more than force. But evidence doesn't care about excuses. The forensic examination confirmed what my body had been carrying for years. Old injuries. New injuries. Patterns that told the truth even when my voice faltered. The police arrived quietly. Julian's mask finally cracked. He shouted. Accused me. Called me ungrateful. Said I had destroyed his life. As they handcuffed him, he leaned close and hissed. You'll regret this. He was wrong. Exposure doesn't destroy victims, it frees them. I stayed in the hospital for 2 weeks. I was terrified of what would happen next. I had no house, no caregiver, no clear future. Then a woman I barely remembered walked into my room. Her name was Ruth, a distant cousin I hadn't seen in decades. She had heard about my case through a friend who worked at the hospital. She sat beside my bed and said simply, "You're not going anywhere alone." She took me into her home. Adapted a room. Installed rails. Hired a real therapist. Treated me like a human being again. The first nights there, I slept in fear. Every sound made my heart race. When Ruth entered the room, I flinched. She noticed. So she began announcing herself softly before entering. Moving slowly. Always asking permission before touching me. That's when I learned something important. Real care never requires fear. Recovery was slow. Painful. Emotional. But something inside me had already changed. For the first time in years, I believed I might survive. I thought rescue meant instant healing. I was wrong. Freedom didn't feel the way I imagined it would. I thought the moment Julian was gone, I would finally breathe. Instead, my body stayed locked in fear, as if it didn't trust the danger had truly passed. At Ruth's house, silence terrified me more than noise. At night, I slept with the light on. Every creak of the floor made my heart race. When someone stood too close, my muscles tensed automatically, preparing for pain that never came. My body remembered things my mind tried to forget. Trauma doesn't end when abuse ends, it relocates. Ruth arranged physical therapy with a woman named Claire. She was firm but gentle. The kind of person who explains every movement before touching you. During our first session, she noticed how rigid I was. "You're not resisting the exercises," she said softly. "You're protecting yourself." No one had ever described it that way. We started slowly. Breathing exercises. Tiny movements. Claire explained that fear had taught my muscles to stay contracted, like armor I forgot how to remove. Each session drained me more than factory work ever had. Healing hurts in a way pain never warns you about. There were days I wanted to quit. Days I felt foolish for believing recovery was possible. Days I cried from frustration because my hand refused to obey my brain. But then, 3 months into therapy, something extraordinary happened. Claire placed a small foam ball in my palm and asked me to try closing my fingers. I didn't expect anything. Then my fingers moved. Just slightly. But they moved. I broke down. So did Claire. The body doesn't forget how to live, it just waits for safety. From that day forward, progress came in fragments. A finger curl. A wrist lift. A step with support. Every tiny victory felt like reclaiming stolen territory. At the same time, I began therapy for my mind. Dr. Lewis was patient. Direct. Unafraid of hard truths. She helped me name what happened to me without minimizing it. Care isn't abuse. Love doesn't demand silence. Being a mother doesn't mean surrendering your humanity. Those sentences rewired me more than medicine ever could. Understanding isn't instant, it's constructed piece by piece. Months later, Claire suggested we try walking with a cane. I was terrified. My legs shook. My heart pounded. But Ruth stood on one side, Claire on the other. I took one step. Then another. When I reached the end of the room, I collapsed into tears. That was the moment I realized something powerful. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. Independence is the most dangerous thing an abuser can lose control over. As my strength returned, my future came into question. I could no longer work in a factory. My body wouldn't allow it. Ruth reminded me of something I had forgotten. You always healed people, she said. Just not with machines. She was right. I had spent my life learning plants, teas, remedies, natural healing passed down through women who never had formal training but knew how to care. So I enrolled in a small herbalism course. For the first time in decades, I wasn't learning to survive, I was learning to grow. I studied plants that calmed nerves, roots that strengthened the body, leaves that eased pain. I found purpose hidden in dried petals and labeled jars. Sometimes purpose waits quietly until suffering clears the noise. While I rebuilt my life, Julian's case moved through the courts. I avoided thinking about it until the day the verdict arrived. That's when I learned something important. Real care never requires fear. Recovery was slow, painful, emotional. But something inside me had already changed. For the first time in years, I believed I might survive. I thought rescue meant instant healing. I was wrong. Freedom didn't feel the way I imagined it would. I thought the moment Julian was gone, I would finally breathe. Instead, my body stayed locked in fear, as if it didn't trust the danger had truly passed. At Ruth's house, silence terrified me more than noise. At night, I slept with the light on. Every creak of the floor made my heart race. When someone stood too close, my muscles tensed automatically, preparing for pain that never came. My body remembered things my mind tried to forget. Trauma doesn't end when abuse ends, it relocates. Ruth arranged physical therapy with a woman named Claire. She was firm but gentle. The kind of person who explains every movement before touching you. During our first session, she noticed how rigid I was. "You're not resisting the exercises," she said softly. "You're protecting yourself." No one had ever described it that way. We started slowly. Breathing exercises. Tiny movements. Claire explained that fear had taught my muscles to stay contracted, like armor I forgot how to remove. Each session drained me more than factory work ever had. Healing hurts in a way pain never warns you about. There were days I wanted to quit. Days I felt foolish for believing recovery was possible. Days I cried from frustration because my hand refused to obey my brain. But then, 3 months into therapy, something extraordinary happened. Claire placed a small foam ball in my palm and asked me to try closing my fingers. I didn't expect anything. Then my fingers moved. Just slightly. But they moved. Guilty. The sentence was shorter than I hoped. Longer than he deserved. But it was official. He no longer owned my story. That night, I stood alone in front of the mirror and said something out loud for the first time. "I survived you." And I believed it. I thought justice would be the end of the story. I was wrong. Healing didn't arrive all at once. It came disguised as routine. Morning sunlight through the kitchen window. The quiet comfort of making tea. The steady rhythm of walking to work on my own 2 feet. After years of being controlled, choosing something as small as when to wake up felt revolutionary. With Ruth's encouragement, I rented a tiny shop near the park. Nothing fancy, one counter, wooden shelves, glass jars filled with dried leaves and roots. I named it Second Bloom, because that's exactly what it was. At first, customers came for remedies. They stayed for conversations. People don't just seek healing for their bodies, they search for permission to heal their lives. Word spread. Someone's headaches improved. Another person slept through the night. For the first time in years. Elderly women lingered to talk. Young mothers asked questions not just about herbs, but about strength. I listened. I always listened. The shop became more than a business, it became a refuge. For the first time since my youth, I earned money without pain. Without fear. Without surrendering myself. And with independence came something I hadn't expected. Love. His name was Thomas. A widower. Gentle. Unhurried. He came in weekly for calming tea and never once crossed a boundary. He asked before touching my hand. He waited for consent in ways that healed parts of me I didn't know were still broken. Real love doesn't rush, it reassures. Life settled into something peaceful. Predictable. Safe. Years passed. Julian faded into a memory I locked away. I knew he was released early for good behavior. I chose not to follow his life. Knowing too much felt like reopening a wound that had finally scarred. I believed the universe had closed that chapter for good. I was wrong. One rainy Thursday morning, I was restocking jars when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in decades. "Mom." The sound froze my blood. I turned slowly. Julian stood at the doorway. But not the man I remembered. He was thinner. Bent. His hair grey. His hands shook as he leaned on a cane. His eyes, once so confident, now darted nervously around the shop. Time punishes monsters in ways prison never can. He began crying immediately. Loud, messy sobs meant to draw sympathy. He said he was sick. That doctors warned him he might lose mobility. That he needed help, care, forgiveness. I have no one else, he whispered. The words once used to trap me now sounded hollow. I felt nothing. No rage. No fear. No pity. Only clarity. Healing doesn't always roar, sometimes it arrives as calm. I asked my assistant to step outside. I wanted no witnesses. Julian begged. Blamed youth. Claimed confusion. Spoke of God and repentance. Tried every manipulation he had ever mastered. I listened without interrupting. Then I spoke. You know what dependency feels like now, I said. You know what it means to trust someone with your body. His face drained of color. I told him I remembered everything. Every threat. Every lie. Every night I prayed not to wake up. I told him forgiveness is not the same as access. Boundaries are not cruelty, they are survival. He tried one last tactic. What will people think of you? He asked. A mother who abandons her child. That's when I laughed. My child died years ago, I replied. What's standing here is a stranger. I told him to leave. To seek state care. To never return. He collapsed onto a chair, sobbing. But I didn't move. Power returns the moment you stop explaining yourself. Eventually, he left. I locked the door behind him and sat down shaking, not from fear, but from release. Later, I learned he was placed in a public care facility. Dependent. Overlooked. Waiting. The same fate he once threatened me with. And I felt no guilt. Only peace. I thought that confrontation was the final lesson. But life still had one more truth to teach me. People often ask me if I ever forgave my son. They ask it gently, as if forgiveness is the final box a survivor must check to prove healing is complete. My answer makes some of them uncomfortable. No. I didn't forgive him. And I don't need to. For a long time, I believed forgiveness was an obligation, especially for a mother. That love meant endless mercy. That blood erased consequences. Therapy taught me something different. Forgiveness is a choice. Safety is a necessity. Healing doesn't require absolution, it requires honesty. Today, my life is quiet in the best possible way. I wake up before sunrise, make my tea, and walk to my shop while the streets are still. Sleepy. The bell over the door rings as customers arrive. Some come for remedies. Some come to talk. Many come because they feel safe there. I recognize that feeling. Because once, safety felt impossible to me. I use what I learned, through pain, through rebuilding, to help others. Women. Elderly people. Those who feel trapped by bodies that no longer cooperate or families that don't protect them. I remind them of something crucial. Dependence does not cancel dignity. Vulnerability never removes your right to boundaries. Over the years, I helped form a small support circle. We meet weekly after closing hours. No judgment. No pressure. Just stories, truth, and courage shared quietly. Some women came in broken whispers. Some left standing taller. Watching that transformation is something I treasure more than any success I've had. Occasionally, people bring up Julian. They tell me he's not doing well. That he's lonely. That illness has taken what strength he had left. They expect me to feel something. But I already grieved him. A long time ago. You cannot mourn what was never truly loving. I don't celebrate his suffering. I don't wish him pain. But I also don't feel responsible for rescuing him from consequence. He chose. Justice didn't heal me. Self-respect did. One afternoon, while reorganizing the shop, I caught my reflection in the glass jars. Older, yes, but standing tall. Strong. Whole. That's when I realized something profound. He took years from my life. But he did not take my future. Survival becomes victory the moment fear loses authority. Love returned to my life too, slowly, respectfully. I learned that affection can be gentle. That touch can wait. That care doesn't demand silence. I learned how to say no without guilt. How to say yes without fear. The stroke changed my body. The abuse scarred my past. But neither defined my ending. Sometimes, customers ask how I found the strength to keep going. I tell them the truth. Strength didn't arrive all at once. It arrived in pieces. A scream. A step. A boundary. A refusal. Courage often whispers before it roars. I share my story now not to shock, but to remind. If you are dependent on someone who hurts you, you are not powerless. If your voice trembles, it still matters. If you're afraid no one will believe you, someone will. And if you've survived something unspeakable, you are not broken. You are becoming. The greatest revenge is not punishment, it's freedom. I am Eleanor Bennett. I am 72 years old. I live in Savannah. I sell healing herbs. And tell the truth. And my life, the life I built from ashes, is the proof that no matter how deep the darkness, light still finds its way in. If this story moved you, share it. Someone out there needs to hear it. And remember, it's never too late to reclaim your life.